More than half of all British universities are hostile to free speech. Says who? Says a writer named Tom Slater, who has compiled something called the Free Speech University Rankings. He blames this on something called safe space. Safe space is the umbrella term for a set of policies that aim to make university an environment that is free from intimidation or harassment. Why does he blame this? Because in order to protect minority groups that have historically been discriminated against, these policies restrict certain forms of speech that are deemed offensive and would otherwise deter these groups from expressing their identity. And he's not the only one who has a problem with this. In fact, arguments over the boundaries of free speech in university have pitted students against academics at Oxford, against each other at Cambridge, and against most of the popular press pretty much any time controversy has ever erupted on campus. And yet, with the full support of the National Union of Students, safe space policies have now been formally adopted by 22 students' unions and informally by many more. We appear to be at an impasse. The only way to protect the rights of one group, it seems, is to restrict the rights of another. Or is it? You see, I don't think this debate is about rights at all. I think it's about the values that guide the way these groups deal with disagreement. Defenders of free speech, for example, seek to explore disagreement in order to solve the problem, whereas defenders of safe space seek to prevent disagreement in order to avoid making the problem worse. Hence, when the Cambridge Union invited Germaine Greer to speak and urged anyone who objected to her views on transgender people to directly challenge her, the university's LGBT+ society complained that even giving her a platform risked alienating a community already struggling to gain acceptance. But what matters most is how these two groups deal with criticism. In my club, Debating London, we have a saying: a great debate means hearing both sides of the argument and both sides of the argument hearing each other. Now, unfortunately, in this debate, both sides all too often resort to name-calling. So defending free speech suddenly makes you a bigot, and defending safe space makes you a wimp. And it is this failure to have a balanced debate in which each side is prepared to depart from their own position and walk in the shoes of their opponents that presents us with a much bigger problem: echo chambers. In echo chambers, bias is confirmed, not challenged. Independent thinking is deterred, not encouraged, and beliefs are imposed, not discussed. You know you're in one if nobody else around you can make a coherent case for an opinion other than their own. And it's a test that even the most ardent defenders of free speech all too frequently fail, and one that defenders of safe space simply refuse to take. Now, it's easy to ignore this problem if it doesn't directly affect you. And after all, challenging your own beliefs, it can be an unsettling experience. But there is a group of young teachers and student leaders in East Africa who are tackling it head-on precisely because they cannot afford not to. They're called I Debate Rwanda, a charity that inspires young people to think and speak a better world by teaching them how to convert echo chambers into debate chambers. And they do this through a network of after-school clubs in which young people are encouraged to talk about the challenges facing their communities and then critique their solutions. In 2013, iDebate invited me and 3 of my colleagues to help them run the first ever debate camp in their country's history. We arrived to find 140 teenagers and young adults from 20 different schools who had taken 2 weeks out of their Christmas holidays just to be there. Now, some of you may know Rwanda well, but some of you may have only heard about it for one reason: In 1994, almost 1 million Rwandans were killed in just 100 days in an act of genocide by soldiers and government-backed militias. That's nearly 10,000 people a day. The militants went door to door, fueled by a relentless campaign of hate that have filled the pages of their newspapers and the textbooks of their schools. Poets wrote and musicians sang in praise of the extermination of the country's Tutsi minority. The national radio station relayed instructions on which villages to target and incited locals to join in and murder their friends and neighbors, with their own deaths awaiting them if they refused to comply. This was an echo chamber of the worst kind, and it is the reason why safe space is prioritized over free speech at almost every level of society in Rwanda today. So you can imagine why this would make running a debate camp somewhat problematic. Parents were skeptical about what their children would learn. Government officials questioned the motives of me and my team for entering the country. Even the students themselves took some convincing. 3 years later, young people are traveling from across East Africa to take part in iDebates competitions. The government is helping to fund hand-picked debate teams to tour and speak at America's most prestigious universities. Youth leaders are representing their communities to policymakers at international summits. So how did they change so many minds in so little time? First, they presented a vision designed to win the support of those who initially doubted them. The iDebate vision can be summed up in 2 words: never again. They believe it is their civic duty to embed the principles of good governance and public engagement in the next generation of Rwandan leaders so that the horrors of 1994 are never repeated. Second, they connected this vision to what young people themselves wanted to achieve. When my team and I returned to Rwanda in 2014, we asked our students how they felt this had helped them. Patrick told us how it helped him work out what he wanted to do with his life. Before I started debating, he said, I had all kinds of dreams and aspirations, from becoming a writer, to an inventor, to an engineer. I wasn't quite sure, but now I know I want to become a leader. Joyce, who dreams of becoming an airline pilot, explained how it helped her to inspire others. My role model, she said, is Babazi Esther, the only female pilot in Rwanda. If I become the second female pilot, I will be able to engage and encourage women to be a part of science and technology, because I gained the skills of convincing people through debating and speaking. Third, and most important of all, iDebate bound its students to a covenant that in return for the safety of the debate chamber, in which all speech is free from consequence, they must use their voice not just to advance their own position, but to make the best possible case they can for whatever position is put in front of them. That's why there's no need to choose between free speech and safe space in a debate chamber. Because every viewpoint has to be heard, respected, and understood, as you never know when you will be called on to defend it, as if it were your own. So what lessons can we draw from iDebate about how to help students deal with disagreement in British universities? 1, present a vision of a better world that would make students want to overcome their differences in the first place. Put another way, what is the purpose of university? 2, connect that vision to what students want to get out of their education. According to the National Union of Students, 65% of them ultimately want to get a good job. Since starting debating London, I have met thousands of graduates who would have joined a debate club at university if they had known then how much it would have helped their career. And 3, work with students to simulate the decisions that lead to disputes before they become news, by providing them with the safe space in which they can experiment with defending other points of view. We can help them to learn about each other's objections and agree a process for managing conflict in the future. And for those of you who are students, if there is just one thing that I want you to take away from tonight, it is this. Your choice is not between free speech and safe space. The choice you face is between echo chambers and debate chambers. I know where I stand. I know where he stands. Now, where do you stand?